promote good mental health of all the people involved in the clubs, especially the athletes. So I know, Judy, you were here last week. I'm not sure if others were here last week as well, but just to give a bit of a recap and then to build into today. So I've got obviously I'm the CEO of Richmond Wellbeing. We're the largest provider of community mental health services in WA. We've got hundreds of staff. We've been here for 48 years in WA, and all we do is mental health services, and we're really passionate about it. I'm really passionate about doing this in sporting clubs. I started doing presentations around mental health in my own cricket club a few years ago after we had a suicide. But swimming is really close to my heart. I love swimming. I've done a lot of training at Guildford Kalamunda Swimming Club. I've swum to Rottnest solo 3 times. So I'm not a high performance pool swimmer. I'm never going to go to the Olympics, but I absolutely know swimming. That's for sure. So I guess what I present today is based on my understanding of mental health, but also, yeah, a love of swimming and a good knowledge of swimming. So I will recap a couple of things. So from my first presentation, so Judy, you'll be expert on that by now, but before we get into the meaty topic of how we support children through disappointment in sport, we need to get our mindset right as parents. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen because I'm becoming so expert at this now. So people should be able to see a few slides that I've got on the screen here or through a PDF. So yeah, today we're going to talk about how we help kids deal with disappointment. So here's the starting point before we even get into this, is we are parents, we are building the person, the coaches build the athlete. You can't be the coach and the parent, because as parents, we are trying to mentor and develop young people to be well-adjusted, mature adults. And we want our children to realize that we value them because of the people they are and the adults they're turning into, not purely based on their sporting achievements. So yes, we need to celebrate the wins. We still need to love them through the losses, but we need our kids to realize that the value we see in them is because we love them and care for them as children, not because we are high performance coaches and seeing them as the athlete. We have to see them as our children first and athletes second. So how do we build resilience? Now, this is also applicable for many other areas of life. So it's interesting if you look at people who are futurists and say, what will the workforce need in 15 to 20 years time? Who will be employable? Resilience is up there in every single person's list. So too is creativity and teamwork and problem solving. And these are some things you can learn. This is the beauty of swimming, is that you can learn so many life lessons through swimming. And that, again, is the platform and the starting point for parents. We need to see, yes, if you want your kids to go to the Olympics, that's great. And do whatever you need to do to provide that opportunity. But swimming, the reality is that very, very few people go to the Olympics. But every child who participates in swimming can use that as a sport and as a vehicle to build resilience and problem solving and teamwork and build into a great person. So as a parent, that's how I look at my children playing sport, is how do I use this to teach them valuable life lessons? Because again, I am trying to develop my children into being great adults. I'm not here to try and get them into being professional sports people. They have coaches to do that. So again, it's about the balance. Now, can we expect a lot and want our kids to perform well? Absolutely, definitely. And many of your children will be in high performance swimming clubs, but again, it's the priority. We need to value our kids. We love them. We care for them because they are our kids. That is that's the greatest value we see in them. And second to that, we also want them to perform really well in sport. Where children don't succeed, well, where sport can put pressure on a relationship between children and parents and not build resilience is when a child feels my most value to my parent is by my sporting achievements, and my mum or dad value me because of my sport. Now, we may not think that, but we need to put ourselves in the minds of 15-year-olds and 13-year-olds and our children, because children are great at catastrophizing things, and they haven't got fully formed brains, and they don't have great rational logical thinking sometimes. So we need to and Jessica, are you able to let those other people in, or from your end? Okay, it's got that message that came up then.
Yeah,
so okay, so I'll go on to the next slide. So building resilience. So if we look about, what is resilience? It's the ability of our children to keep focused and to keep going, whether they win, lose, or draw. Now, interestingly, so much of how our children will respond when they fail, inverted commas, by not succeeding, so much of that is set when our children actually win and when things are going quite well. Because in the old adage in sport, when you're going well, you're never as good as you think you are, and when you're going badly, you're not as bad as you think you are. But when our kids win, if we give them all of our best energy and all the best praise because they win, our kids are then going to think, well, I'm really valued by my parent. My mum and dad are really interested in what I'm doing. They really love me because I'm winning. And that is setting our kids up for a really big fall when they don't win. Because how we respond when our kids are winning or doing well actually puts in their frame of mind how they think we will respond when they don't win. So, for example, if we criticize the kids who didn't do well when our kid did, that's going to make our kids think, gee, I wonder what my mum or dad will think of when I don't do well. So, for example, if we said, oh, look at those kids coming, they're not even qualifying for the finals. They're not working hard. They're not in shape. They're not doing well. They're never going to succeed. Those comments stick in the minds of our children. Our kids are always listening to us, even though when we ask them to do the dishes, they're never listening to us. Any other time, everything we say, our kids are listening, and it's having an impact on them, and it will bear fruit down the track. So it's too difficult, or it's very difficult, to only start focusing on our child's experience and how we talk to them and how we communicate to them just when they're failing or not doing their best. We need to be thinking about this now. If your child is in competing and looking to do their best, everything you say to them day in, day out is having an impact or an imprint on how they will respond when they don't do as well as they want. How you talk about what you value right now is going to be having a big impact on them. So go to the next slide. Couple of key slides to look at this. So the success our kids experience doesn't define them, nor does it impact the value we see in them. So we need our kids to realize we love them and value them because they are our kids. But then what do we actually value in the kids? This is how we can build resilience. I'll talk through more the child-specific communication in a later part of the presentation, but we need to reward and celebrate effort, attitude, character, and improvement. Now, if success comes on top of that, absolutely we'll celebrate the success. But when our kids do well, if we say to them, look, you won the race today, and that was great. But you know what? You know what I'm most proud of is that you've worked so hard. You've been so consistent up until now. You've trained really hard for 9 months. You've got to bed at the right time. You put in maximum effort. You've eaten well. You've really prioritized your swimming. You've shown real guts, real character, and you've really focused on improving. That's what I'm most proud about. If we say that to our kids when they win, then when they don't win, they're going to think to themselves, okay, I didn't win, but when I did win, Dad didn't actually, he was happy that I won. But when I won, Dad actually talked more about effort and attitude and character. So I still think Dad's going to be really proud of me. I think he's really going to value me, even though I didn't actually win that race today. So in that regard, this is how we can build resilience, and this is how we minimize this kind of falling off the cliff moment for our kids when they don't win. And we've all seen it where kids, and it doesn't have to just be in sport, when our kids didn't win an award or didn't get a role or whatever it was they wanted, they didn't get it, and they just feel like they're falling off a cliff and they're really emotional and they feel like they've let themselves down, they've let us down, and all these catastrophizing thoughts and emotions that our kids have. And so again, I will talk later in the presentation around what do we do when our kids fall in the heap. But what I'm really trying to focus on here is how do we minimize or mitigate the chance of our kids falling in the heap in the first place? And the way we do that is we say, we love you and care for you because you're our child and you're an athlete, number two. That's not, we're never ever going to value what you do in the pool above the fact that we value just because we love you because you're our child. Second thing is what we value and celebrate and reward is effort, attitude, character, and improvement, because we are developing children into adults, not developing award-winning Olympic gold medal winning swimmers. So this is really important for us to understand because, again, we can learn the skills of how we pick our kids up when they're in a heap. But the better skill is to learn how to protect our kids, how to parent day to day in a way that reduces the chance of them actually falling in that heap. So, and the way we do it is by doing this consistently. Our kids are already better placed to deal with disappointment because it's not a direct threat to their value or worth in their eyes. And again, we need to put ourselves in the mind and the eyes of a child. We must be mindful of this in every training session and every event. Our actions and speech always impacts our kids. It frames their worldview and how they believe we see them and how we value them. So yeah, I can't emphasize enough the importance. We reward and acknowledge effort, attitude, character improvement because we're developing great adults. That's our focus. When our kids win, how are we speaking about the kids who didn't win? Again, don't speak poorly about other kids, because if that's your child next time, they're going to think, wow, what does my parent think of me now that I didn't do so well? Kids always remember, think back to your own childhood. I'm sure there are things you can remember that your parents said when you were 5, 6, 10, 12, that really stick in your mind. And it can be the most random things that you just never know when kids are listening, and kids have an amazing ability to take things out of context. So we need to be really careful when we're talking about our kids' success and the people they compete against. And what can be also really good is if you say to your kids, look, there's another kid in your club who, they're not the fastest racer, but you know what? I really admire that child because they're the hardest worker, they're committed, they're dedicated, and they're a great teammate. They're a great club member. And how we need to be thinking about what seeds are we planting in the minds of our kids about other things that we value, and how are we talking positively about other kids who may not be elite? Because what we don't want to do is say, gee, that kid was so fast. The child who won that 100-meter freestyle race, man, they're amazing. And then in the whole drive home, wow, they had a fast start. I couldn't believe how good their tumble turns were. Wow, the early vertical forearm of that child is amazing. If all we're doing is just talking about how great the best child was in a race, our child just thinks, wow, I'm being compared to this. My dad or mum is comparing me to this, and this is what they expect of me. As opposed to on the way home in the car saying, that kid was fast. But what about these other kids who are doing well? What about these other kids in your club who are improving? They're really dedicated, and they're really humble when they don't win. We need to be talking positively and highlighting the traits and characteristics and attitudes in other people that we want to see in our kids, because that is what they will value. So we need to, again, acknowledge and reward effort, attitude, character improvement. And this slide comes up again because this is what I'm really trying to drill home. And I know that it's hard to take away many, we usually only take away a couple of messages from a presentation, and this is it. We acknowledge and reward effort, attitude, character improvement. And because we are developing adults, not elite athletes. That's the coaches who do that. So we want to instill a growth mindset, not a deficit mindset. So what does that mean? As you know, as your child's going through training, it's very, and we're preparing for a big event, it's very easy to look at the deficit mindset. I remember when I was training for Rottnest, and I'd always think, gee, I've got to put on more muscle. Gee, I could try and lose a couple of kilos. I need to get better aerobic capacity. Why can't I drop 2 seconds a lap off my times? And it's so easy to focus on the things that we're not doing particularly well, and as opposed to saying, when I was doing my training, I was improving race on race. I was getting really confident in the water, building my racing skills, but I was just so focused on what I wasn't doing or what I still had to do. In our children, we want to instill a growth mindset, and not just in their swimming. Again, this is where it is a life lesson for every part of their life. Now, this is about how we have a balance to say, yes, this is where we want to go. I know I've got some room for improvement, but here are my strengths. This is what I'm doing well. This is how I've improved. Because if all we ever do is look at the deficits, we never think or believe that we can actually achieve that. Whereas if we look at it in the context and say, gee, look at all this body of work I've done. I'm training really hard. I've got a great attitude. I've got great strength of character. I'm really resilient. I'm doing my best, and I think I can actually improve this. Otherwise, our deficits become a really huge mountain that seems insurmountable to climb. And we want our kids in every aspect of their life to think, yes, I've got some improvement, but I've got some strengths, and I'm going to keep focusing on my strengths, and I'm going to grow, and I'm going to improve. That's a really important thing. I could probably do a 6-hour series on growth mindset for children and athletes, but there's lots of things for people to read, but it's a good thing for us to focus on. Again, talking about the character that we're building, how our kids, their actions, are they demonstrating humility and empathy and graciousness when they win, lose, or draw? These are the sorts of things we want to be drawing out. These are great ways that we develop the social and emotional intelligence of our children, because again, resilience is very closely tied to our social and emotional intelligence. And as we build other parts of that, the humility and the empathy and the graciousness, all of these characteristics make it easier for children to increase their social and emotional intelligence and their ability to reflect on their own achievements. This is the really good thing, is that only one person can ever win a race. And so if our kids feel that the only value they have is when they win races, gee, that's a lot of pressure. But every single child can demonstrate humility. They can improve, they can work hard, they can demonstrate a good attitude, empathy, graciousness when they win. So that's really what we want to see, is we want every child to feel that, gee, the expectations of my parents are achievable, because they're looking at the character of me as a person, not winning. Now, yes, we can still expect a lot. We can expect our kids to work hard, but this is where we use swimming as the vehicle for that, to say, I'm looking to see strength of character in you, and that is getting up at 5 o'clock every day to go to your training, being motivated to go to training. I want to see discipline in your eating. I want to see you going to bed early. I want to see you doing your homework so you can balance all your commitments. And the good thing is that every child can do that. So every child can reach the expectations, because that's a great thing for kids. And it makes them feel $1 million when we set an expectation or a goal and they match it. But if our expectation or goal is for them to win the Olympics, only one child of all of our kids can ever win that. So all of the other kids are up against it, and they won't be able to achieve that. So again, we're developing great adults, and we're looking for great characteristics. Okay, so here's some of the really important parts about when our children do fall in a heap. Because even if we do everything that I've said before expertly, children are quite volatile in their emotions. Again, they catastrophize things. They're not rational, logical thinkers at the best of times. So when our kids do have negative thoughts, we want them to feel safe to express those negative thoughts, to express their disappointment and the pressure that they might feel. Some things we don't ever want to do for children is we don't want to belittle them. We don't want to belittle or invalidate the way they're feeling. So it is not constructive to say to a child, look, don't don't feel that way. That now you're just being silly. There's no reason you should feel that way, because then kids might think, oh, now my mum or dad think I'm being stupid, but this is just the way I feel. So we need to validate and listen to the way our kids feel, because if we say to them, oh, look, that's just being ridiculous, that's a bit silly, then our kids will think, okay, I'm not going to share how I feel next time. And that's an even worse outcome, because if kids don't share their negative thoughts or their disappointment or the pressure, it can build up, and if they're not shared, they can catastrophize these very, very quickly, and they can build it into a huge issue, 10 times bigger than what it is in reality. And this is when we see poor mental health outcomes for kids, and see them dropping out of sports, and seeing their behavior really become more erratic in other parts of their life. So we want to enable an environment where our kids can talk about their negative thoughts, their disappointment, and the pressures. But this is where we want to reframe the thoughts. So we're not solving the problem. So, well, I guess that's the one thing, is we don't ever want to see their thoughts as a problem, and nor are we trying to solve it. So the worst things we can do as parents is invalidate and say, oh, look, you're just being silly. There's no reason to feel that way. Or to think we've got to solve it, because we don't. And that is a bad habit. And men are especially bad when we hear other people sharing with us their mental health issues or their negative thoughts. We feel under lots of pressure to solve it. And that's actually why men most often say to other men, oh, look, now you'll be right, mate. Yeah, you'll get over it. You'll be fine. The reason men do that is because not because they don't care, but inside they're sitting there thinking, oh no, how do I solve this? How do I solve this? I feel under pressure to solve this person's problem. They've come to me looking for a solution. What do I do? What do I do? And then they just say, oh, look, yeah, you'll be right. You'll be fine. And for men especially, we need to learn some of these skills, and we need to stop ourselves from jumping in and solving or fixing. What we want to do is ask more leading questions of our children. Say, okay, do you want to talk about that? But why do you feel disappointed? And then we can bring it to, well, you know what? I'm not disappointed in you, because I've just seen you training hard, working so well, disciplined in your training, a great strength of character. You're a great teammate. Everyone respects you at the club. So I'm not disappointed. And so that's how we can reframe. And again, all of this builds on what I've said at the beginning of this presentation, is our focus is on developing great young people to be great adults. So and when we do that, and when we are consistent in that, then our kids may lose a race. They might feel like they've fallen off the cliff, but then we can say to them, oh, let's talk about your negative thoughts and your disappointment. And then we can say, well, I'm not disappointed. I'm really proud of you, because of the person you're turning into, and the discipline and the character and the attitude. That's what I'm proud of. And now we can still say, yeah, look, I feel for you, because I know you wanted to win. I know you worked hard, and you dreamt of winning this race. And I really feel for you, but I'm not disappointed of you. I'm really proud of you. And so this is how we can reframe their thoughts. And when they feel under pressure, they might be saying, well, I've got to win these races. I've got to be the best. And this is when we can say, well, I'm looking for you to be your best, not the best. And this is how we can reframe this sense of pressure, and to say, well, all I expect of you is to be your best. I expect you to train hard. I expect you to be a good and gracious winner and loser. I expect you to respect your coach and do what your coach says. I expect you to be disciplined in your eating and getting to bed. Because again, a child can achieve that. They'll be sitting there thinking, okay, my parent has these expectations and I can achieve that. This is all really achievable. But if we're not doing that groundwork in the way we communicate to our kids in the lead up to these races, in their day-to-day, week-to-week training, it's really hard for us to reframe. If all we've ever been talking about with our kids is winning that race and qualifying first, it's very, very hard for them to feel comfortable to express their disappointments and pressures to us. And it's very, very hard for us to reframe that, because our kids are going to be thinking, now, hold on, Dad's only ever talked about winning. Now he's talking about training hard. I'm confused. Kids can get confused pretty easily. Again, and this is how we can reframe our children's self-perception, remind them of what we value as character, not elite performance. So Again, these are really important skills for parents, and not just in swimming. Again, this is highly applicable for life. Is we need to demonstrate consistently to our kids what we value in them and what we expect of them. And then when they have disappointments, we can reframe that based on how we communicate and what we demonstrate our value to our kids in their just a consistent day-to-day life. So how we get kids to open up is different. This is where parents, again, I'm not trying to teach parents to be psychologists here. You know your kids better than anybody else. I've got 3 kids. They're totally different. How I get them to open up is entirely different between the 3 of them. You'll know what's best. Typically, especially with boys, not sitting across looking at them, giving them lots of space, lots of time. I do all the best talking with my boys in the car when I'm not actually looking directly at them. Or when they go to bed, they're pretty young. I tuck them into bed at like 7:30, 8 o'clock. I'll just go lay next to them and we're just both looking up to the roof. And then that's a great time to chat. Now, that's what works for me. I know my kids. You know your kids better than anybody else. But having like a sit down across the table interrogation style doesn't work well for many teenagers or young kids. So it's about learning the best way to get them to open up. But we need to develop the skills to reframe the thoughts, because our children are probably not going to have the social and emotional intelligence to reframe their thoughts to a growth mindset. But as we do this, we can teach our kids self-awareness of their own thoughts and feelings. Then we can try and teach them to self-regulate. So we can say to them, and again, as the next point says, they can gain perception, that should say perspective, and not catastrophize things in their mind. But this is where we say to our kids, instead of saying, "Oh, look, now you're just being silly. That's just ridiculous," we say to them, "Oh, just as I'm hearing you, it doesn't sound like such a big deal to me. It sounds like you've done really well, and it just sounds like you're focusing a lot on this really small negative." Now that's a way of inviting a child to look at something from a different perspective, as opposed to saying, "No, that's wrong, you're being silly." And this is where we can talk to our kids about, okay, so this is how you're feeling at the moment. I wonder why you're feeling that way. What are the drivers behind that? And it might just be that they wanted to do better than their friend, or it might be a competitive instinct in them. So understanding the drivers for the behaviors and the feelings is important. But then we can work with our kids and they say, "Look, when I was up on the blocks, I just felt under so much pressure and I was so nervous I could hardly breathe." This is where we can teach our kids, okay, well, why did you feel that way? Why were you under so much pressure? And then it might be them feeling the pressure from us that we're not putting on them, or it might be pressure themselves. And then again, we can talk to them about, well, how can you reframe that? How can you regulate your feelings? How can you kind of think, well, is that actually rational? Now, it's very hard for us to say to our children, that's irrational, that's totally illogical. But there's a difference between that and actually saying to someone, "Oh, well, do you think that would actually come true? Do you think that's real?" So sometimes our kids will essentially say, "I was on the block and I just thought to myself, if I don't win this race, the last 2 years has been a total waste of time." And if you say to the kid, "Oh, that's just stupid," then they're going to say, "Oh, well, now you think I'm being silly." As opposed to, this is how I would reframe that with my child, is say, "Well, but is it a waste of time? What have you gained in the last 2 years through all of your training?" And then you can say, "Look, you've got a lot of discipline. You're really, really fit. You've got great friends. You're an excellent swimmer. Here's all the positives. You've been doing competitive training for 2 years and you've got all of these positives. So win, lose or draw, it's actually not a waste of time. You've done really well and you should be really proud of what you've done over the last 2 years. Yes, it'd be great to win, but it's not a total waste of your life for 2 years if you don't win." And again, that's just an example. I'm sure as I'm saying this, all the parents with kids in swimming programs who will be thinking to yourselves, okay, here's a thought, here's something my child said that I need to reframe. It'll happen all the time. Children, every day, they're saying things that lack perspective, not logical, not rational. And this is where we need to reframe them. And again, we don't criticize them. We don't say, "Oh, that's just stupid," nor do we try and solve it. We try and enable our children to see a problem differently, or we enable our children to reframe the way that they're thinking. and not catastrophize things. And as we work through that more, we can try and teach our kids strategies to change these doubts or fears they have over time. I'll talk about that a bit more in some of the coming series around more specific strategies, because that's quite a bit of work. But to really try and assist parents in your skills of how you help your kids reframe things in their mind and how you teach them some strategies to overcome these doubts or fears. Another one that I'll put in pretty much every presentation, another thing that helps kids keep perspective is they have to have hobbies or pursuits outside of swimming, because if everything they do in their whole life is just about winning a race in 2 years' time and they've got no other groups of friends, no other hobbies or pursuits, it's very easy for our children to lose perspective in that, because it's kind of all or nothing for them. And actually having a more diverse group of friends is very beneficial for every person, especially children as they're growing up. So a couple of little takeaway things for us. We need to be really intentional as parents around what we say to our children and how we parent our children. We need to be calm, consistent, and measured in all situations. And that's not just in swimming, that's in all situations. How we conduct ourselves consistently day to day is absolutely framing how our kids think that we will respond if they don't do well at swimming, or if they don't, meet expectations. It's one I'll touch on a bit more as well, because we're running out of time for today. But obviously we've got 6 presentations in the series over summer, which is great. When our kids do fall in a heap, the best way they can build resilience is by getting up off the floor again and facing their fears and their disappointments again. The growing that they will have and the ability to build resilience from falling off that cliff and being in a heap, but being able to pick themselves up to race again and overcome that. So, for example, I think, oh, look, I raced, I just totally choked in this race and finished last. I'm never going to do that again. I've just fallen in a heap. If we can go through that stage of supporting our children, helping them reframe that, get perspective, have a strengths-based mindset to get back up on the starting blocks, keep training, and then win a race down the track or do better, the life lesson they will learn from that is amazing, and that will have them in such good stead for life. So disappointment and fears is an opportunity for us to build really resilient kids and to build strength of character. So let's look at their fears and disappointments as an opportunity to build and develop them, because again, we are here to develop our young people into great adults with all the skills and characters and attributes and characteristics that we want. So disappointments and fears is an opportunity. Again, that's a growth mindset. A disappointment and a fear is an opportunity for growth and development. So again, as I've said, I've said I'll do this slide a few times. This is the take-home message. We're here to reward and celebrate effort, attitude, character, and improvement. We're developing people, not athletes, as parents. And I know that's hard when we want our kids to win Olympic gold medals, but we will actually get better athletes if, as parents, we focus on them as people, because we need to be there for them, win, lose, or draw, loving them and being proud of them. So I went a little bit over time for that one, but there's so much to cover, and it's such a great topic. And again, we'll be talking a bit more about these. I'll just stop sharing my screen. Now you can see me, Ryan. It's not sharing. Okay, yeah. So this is why I'm really so glad to be working with Swimming WA, and why I'm so glad to be having a 6 series presentation, because there is so much to go over. To try and assist you to be the best parents you can be, and to get the best results out of your young people. So I'll stop talking there and see if anyone has any questions, because I'm sure I've gone over a fair bit of content there.
Just make sure if you ask questions that you turn your mics on, guys. Or you can pop it in the chat as well.
Yeah, happy with the chat as well.
Yeah. I'll kick us off. One thing, we did have a few people join in late, Adrian. So can you just recap some of the leading questions that you mentioned earlier in terms of being able to talk to your kids if maybe they're in a negative mindset or something hasn't gone their way? What were some of the leading questions to get that information out of them?
Yeah, so I guess, as I said, like you know your kids better than anybody else, and it's about learning the strategies and the phrases to try and draw things out. But certainly we're here to ask questions and to seek to understand. So if I sense that there's something not quite right with one of my kids, I don't go in there interrogation style, look, what's up? Just tell me what's going on. Nor do I try and solve things, nor do I belittle or invalidate it. So you'd never ever say to a child, oh, come on, Nate, it's been ridiculous. So I would typically say, and nor do I say to my kids, oh, look, what's wrong? Something's wrong. Because then if there's nothing wrong, then they might say, oh, why do you think there's something wrong? Sometimes you don't win with kids, but sometimes I would say to my kids, look, I'm just kind of getting the vibe that, you're a bit upset about something. Like, is there something you wanted to talk to me about? And then my kid might say, oh, look, I'm really upset, because of what happened at my game today. And then I say, oh, what kind of upset you? And it's important we don't kind of jump to things and say, oh yeah, this person, we don't want to fill the blanks. We want to let our kids, we want to draw it out of them, and we ask leading questions and seek to understand and say, oh, so yeah, what happened that upset you so much? And then when my son says, oh, well, I was just really annoyed because this and this happened, then I'll say, oh, kind of, well, what annoyed you so much about that? And then if they say, oh, well, this person did this and this, again, I don't give a comment. I would say, well, how did you expect your coach to react? So again, I'm waiting as long as I possibly can before I give an opinion or try and solve it or try and direct the conversation. I'd keep drawing out. And what I would keep trying to do is trying to draw out and test and challenge the thinking of my son. So one of the best ways to reframe something in the mind of a child is by seeking to understand so that they might actually get some perspective and reflect themselves. So, for example, if one of my kids was really annoyed with the coach, as an example I was giving, I'd say to them, oh, what kind of upset you so much? My son might say, oh, the coach was just so annoying. So, oh, but I didn't notice anything. What did I miss? Oh, well, when I did this bad shot and then the coach started yelling at me. I said, oh, I didn't hear anyone yelling. What happened there? Oh, well, he didn't yell. He just kind of said in this kind of voice that was kind of annoying. He was like kind of annoyed. I said, oh, well, why do you think he was annoyed? If he was annoyed? And then my son might say, oh, well, because it was kind of a stupid shot and we've been working on it all week at training. I said, oh, well, okay. So can you kind of understand why maybe he was a little annoyed, but why do you think that was? And then my son might say, oh, well, because we've been working on it so much and maybe he was just a bit disappointed that I didn't put it into practice in the training. And this is an example. And then you can say, oh, okay, so you think maybe he wasn't actually that annoyed. He maybe just expected, he thinks you're a really good player and you can do maybe even better. So this is just one example how we can reframe things. But the best way to reframe is, again, asking lots of questions, seeking to understand. And when our children make assumptions or when they jump to conclusions, we get in and we challenge those assumptions or conclusions. And it's things like, and kids are the best at assuming their friends don't like them or their friends are upset with them or the coach is upset with them. And these are examples where we'd say, oh, so why do you think that person's upset with you? Again, it's testing these assumptions and conclusions that our kids draw and actually saying, oh, well, do you think it's actually possible that they're not annoyed with you? Maybe you just kind of took maybe something the wrong way. And again, it's always better than me saying, no, look, you're just being stupid. Your friend's not annoyed at you. You're just being dramatic or super sensitive. That will never have a good outcome with kids. We want to seek to understand and have an open conversation where we just test these things by teasing them out. And that's a way to reframe the thinking of kids.
Perfect. Does anyone else have any other questions or anything they want to double check that they may have heard on? I'll just read out the message from Eric. I think Adrian touched on that already, but validating negative thoughts, would it push them into a negative spiral? How to leave them with a positive feeling so when they're on their own with their thoughts, they don't become too negative?
Well, I think with negative thoughts, we need to absolutely acknowledge when they're there. So we should not say to kids, oh, look, don't be so negative, don't be so down. We need to say, look, one of the ways to acknowledge them, for example, is to say to our kids, look, I'm really sorry that that's the way you feel. You sound really down. You sound really disappointed. You sound like you've got a lot of these negative thoughts. It really hurts me to hear that, and I'm really sorry that you're going through that. But I'm here for you. So this is where we need to acknowledge that they're real. And again, we might think that it's illogical or irrational, but it's real for our kids. So we need to say, look, if that's the way you're feeling, I'm really sorry to hear that. But that's when we try and reframe it. That's when we try and understand. So what is behind these negative thoughts? Is it irrational? Is it illogical? Can we try and retrain and reframe their thinking so that we can teach them the skills? Okay, when I get in this negative mindset, and this is where we'll have another session to go through some of these things. But in the first part, absolutely, we need to acknowledge and validate just because it's real for them. And we can say to our kids, look, it's possible for you to actually learn some skills to reframe this. You don't have to live with these negative thoughts, but it's real for you at the moment. And I'm really sorry to hear that. That's the balance, validating and acknowledging that it's real, but saying to our kids, but on the other hand, there are some skills we can work on to try and get you out of that negative space.
Anyone else got anything they would like to ask? For those that may have come in a little bit later, these sessions are being recorded as well. So you'll be able to jump back on and have a quick listen to what you may have missed. If no one's got any questions, I will move on. So the next part, so the third part of this series isn't until the 20th of March. We've got a bit of a break over summer, as I'm sure parents will be running their kids around to all sorts of swim meets and things like that. So we've just pushed it back a little bit to allow you guys to have time to be able to attend. The next one will be on managing disappointment. So it's, again, like Adrian said, a bit of a follow on, but still incorporating what we've done in the first two sessions. So I hope you all can come to that. And we will obviously remind you a little bit closer to the time as well, of the date and the time and things like that as well, because I'm guessing the next 3 months for most people is going to be extremely hectic. So does anyone have any last comments or questions? Hope we all got something out of that.
I'll just say one thing. As parents, we can often feel quite overwhelmed and think like, how the hell do we parent these teenagers? But the fact that you guys are here and you're aware of your kids and you're trying to better yourself as parents in how you communicate and parent your kids, that says a huge amount. Just the fact that you're here says that you're very, very invested in your kids, and the chances are anyone here probably has quite a high level of social and emotional intelligence, and you're probably pretty well in tune with your kids. So just want to let you know, if you're sitting there thinking, man, this is so hard, where is the manual for parenting these kids? The fact that you're here and so engaged and proactively doing this says to me, in my experience in this, you're probably a pretty good parent. So cut yourself some slack if you think it's hard. Parenting kids is bloody hard, as you all know, and we need to cut ourselves some slack. No one's perfect at this, but the fact you guys are here says you must be pretty bloody good parents, because you're trying to improve yourselves as parents. So hats off and well done to all of you.
Yeah, I'll second that as well. So again, Adrian, thank you very much for your time as well. It's great to have you presenting these sessions. Our partnership is really special to Swimming WA as well. So there's a couple of other thank you messages in the chat, so hopefully you can see those. But I think most people have taken away one or two, hopefully more things from tonight's session. And like I said, guys, there will be another one coming in March on the 20th. Awesome. Okay. Otherwise, have a good night, guys.